Season 2, Episode 32 of the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Alexander Slinsky.
And somehow, I'm Mike Bithell.
Each week, we talk games, what it's like to make games, and the random stuff we don't generally find time to talk about because we're playing and/or making games. We're here at EGX. A big old video games convention here in England, in Birmingham.
It's pronounced Birmingham. It's not pronounced Birmingham. I just like it when Americans say it that way.
Birmingham.
Edinburgh. Yeah.
When you just need a curry.
It's lots of good curry here. It's the home of the Balti, isn't it?
We had some fancy curry.
We've gone to two of the best, I think. But it's very good.
Really good. Show notes. Thomas Was Alone and Volume are both on sale for $5, or your regional equivalent right now on Steam. Subsurface Circular is doing great. Thanks to everyone picking it up. Please leave a lovely Steam review if you enjoyed it. More news about the game in the coming weeks, actually. Finally, the Game Dev Business Handbook, available for pre-order. We have to get the index done this week, or Mike has to get the index done this week.
I have to stare into the abyss. I think I've done 2 chapters out of 20.
Indexes. If you're out there, you know, young listener, and you ever decide to make a book, just put like a third of your time aside for the index.
What hubris I've shown in this decision. Oh well. It's a good book though. It'll be good.
What are you playing, Mike?
I've been at EGX. Oh, what was the back? It was the Lost Bear, right? That's the one I really liked. That was the PSVR game I played. Was it called the Lost Bear? I think it was called the Lost Bear. It's out on PlayStation VR, and it's great. I played that on the show floor. It's a platformer. You're sat in kind of a little kind of rinky-dink theatre, and on stage in front of you is the platformer being played out. And you can control your character, move around, do things. It's from Oddbug Studio. Alexander just held up a business card. He hoped that I would point that out on the show to maintain an air of professionalism, but unfortunately for him, he's now putting that card back in his pocket and shaking his head in disdain. That's fine. So I like to give you insight on how the podcast gets made. As you're playing this character, as you're making this character move around on the stage, you've got some cool particle effects happening. You know, the character jumps in a pile of leaves fall from the ceiling. You disturb a bee's nest and the bees fly out towards you. It's a really nice kind of immersive. It feels like a really good Disney show. Like when you go to Disney World and they have these kind of immersive shows they do. Felt like that. So I'm going to be buying that and playing it through when I get home. Other than that, I think that's genuinely the only game I've been hands-on with. But I've watched a lot of really interesting stuff. There's been a lot of very cool games of the show. I imagine we'll be talking about that later, though.
Yeah, you've mentioned previously on the show, because you do the BAFTA student judging, right? What is that called?
Young Game Design Awards I help out with, yeah. Yeah,
so, you've mentioned on the podcast in the past that there's just this incredible level of talent coming out of these schools. And then you go to a show like this, and there's a whole student section.
Yeah, was it called Transfuser or something? Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is the most like hardcore gamer way of naming a student group. It's a transfusion of awesome. That should be their tagline. Transfuser. It's a transfusion of awesome.
Well, it also it uses a Z. Which is...
That's so very mid-2000s, isn't it? It's like very 2006.
Yeah, it has that, and then there's just... Everything about the branding is
terrible, but the games are great.
The games are great, but the branding is just like someone tripped out of the 90s, and it's just like, yeah, students want to make games.
They need to get the EA Sports, it's in the game guy to do like the voiceover for their booth.
But the work that's in there is just part of that putting you out of work level.
I prefer to think for Alexander as the evolving of a medium, but yeah, by all means, no, definitely, no, they're really good, they're very talented, and there is a lot of raw talent. I think also, the democratization of the tools has helped. I think when I was coming out, I was making mods for Unreal Tournament at that age, and that was a much more obtuse platform to build games in, and these things have gotten a lot better. So I think it's that. I think it's also, yes, there's a lot of talent, and there's also an understanding of how you could actually release a game. There's a pathway to actually profit, in theory. So it's good. It's encouraging. I'm
A lot of kids using Unreal as well, which was not a thing like 5 years ago.
Well, Unreal have done a lot of work. I mean, it's always been the case that the big engine manufacturers have tried to put their tools into universities. And when I was a student, it was Unreal Tournament. Then Unity obviously blew up. And Unreal have been very quietly doing a lot of student outreach over the last few years. And yeah, you're seeing that pay off now.
But we'll actually come back to this second. But yeah, I mostly played a ton of student projects and a lot of projects from first-time developers who, came out of school and went straight into making their own things.
Because that's a thing, and that's great. It's really cool that people can do that.
Yeah, no, it's a very different situation, and I think that's going to become sort of an emerging narrative at GDC in 2018.
Well, GDC's has already for a while now had the because you've got GDC,
that's the Game Developer Conference that happens in San Francisco,
and it's got the mild rumpus on the ground floor. Is it Mega Booth who do there's one like further up the stairs. Like I think like on the second floor of one of the buildings at GDC, there's like an indie showcase that's been there the last couple of years.
Oh,
is that Mega Booth?
It's one of those. It's an iteration on that, yeah, but so I believe it's the same crew.
Yeah, so there's yeah, it's growing up. I think at all these events, you're seeing that kind of that indie side kind of scale up, and I guess that's also because AAA games, as they get more expensive, there's kind of less of them being made, so they're kind of focusing more and more, which means that in terms of like floor space, you are seeing this growth of indies at all these events.
Which leads us perfectly into the next segment.
Great segue, solid segue.
So now it's time for what's going on at the studio, and what's going on at the studio is that we're at EGX, again in Birmingham,
Birmingham.
Stop it.
Why? No, you don't like that?
I don't say that.
I know, but if I say it enough, you're going to accidentally say it.
I will.
No, it's going to be hilarious.
It's the Nottingham thing, right?
Yeah, Nottingham.
Like, where you put it in my head.
Yeah.
Like, is it Nottingham? No. Why would I say it's not? It's Dedham.
I derive a lot of pleasure from kind of sabotaging you in social situations, which is cruel.
So the thing about EGX,
yes.
As you were talking about, is floor space, and clearly from a floor space perspective, independent games are
dominating, right?
Just a huge part of it.
Sure.
There is the transfuser.
It's transfusion of awesome.
So there's the transfuser area, which is the sort of student project area.
Yeah.
There's like a tentacle booth, which is like this Cthulhu looking thing. There is Left Field.
The Left Field collection, which is the oldest of these. The Left Field collection. I feel like they've been doing that for years, and it's really, really well moderated and watched over. Like they are. Yeah.
So I've been saving this question for the podcast. What does left field mean to you? Because it has a very specific American...
out of left field in the UK would be a phrase meaning surprising, strange, different. If it came out of left field means what the hell were they thinking? That's a really weird, interesting, surprising,
but what's
thing.
what's the origin point of that for you?
I mean, I always assumed it was a baseball thing.
It is a baseball thing,
right?
I just wasn't sure if like somehow
we have movies over here. We watch these.
Well, I know.
Is it the same meaning in America? Left field.
Well, yeah.
Like surprising, weird, different, strange. Yeah, maybe stupid.
Yeah, it came out of like left field.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wasn't sure if it was like an American idiom.
Yeah, Henry VIII had two fields. He called them the right field and the left field. In the left field, he kept the smaller, more interesting plots.
You watch in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, there's gonna be like a QI episode, and it's gonna.
I'm gonna feel so stupid.
And right. Sandy's gonna be there, and she's gonna be all like,
"Sandy, you're on a first name basis with Sandy Toxvig."
Yeah,
she's called Mrs. Toxvig to you.
Not when she invites me over for afternoon tea. Thank you very much.
Are you going to become friends with Sandy Toxvig?
Yeah.
Is that your plan?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
She and I are going to hang out at BAFTA together. It's going to be the
You're going to make me get her to do the voiceover for Earthshape 2.
By the way, if you have no idea what we're talking about, it's a show called QI. It's a panel show here. It's actually available. I believe it's available on Hulu right now. In the States.
It's very brilliantly nerdy.
It is a fantastic show.
She now hosts Bake Off, which is
the Great British Baking Show.
That's what it's called in America, right? Yeah.
Yeah. No, but her and
do you like her? Do you like Noel Fielding on Bake Off? Sorry, listeners. Do you like Noel Fielding?
Officially
on Bake Off?
tangenting now.
Because I assume Noel Fielding is not a known figure in America beyond probably like the IT crowds. Probably.
Right. So yeah. So we would.
Do you get Mighty Boosh?
No.
Okay, so to you, Noel Fielding is that guy who was in one episode of IT Crowd.
He's that vampire guy from the IT Crowd.
Right. So do you like him in that role? Because he's got a lot of interesting cultural connotations in the UK that make him kind of controversial on that show, because he's just weird. He's super weird and awesome as a result. Do you like him on the show?
I mean, I like him on the show, but it's yes, I recognize he was on Mighty Boosh. He's on all the panel shows here. Like he's on something on Channel 4 called Taskmaster, which I guarantee there's going to be an American version on Comedy Central like in the next year or two.
Yeah,
I don't know if they'll keep calling it Taskmaster, but anyway, it's
Taskmaster.
Taskmaster.
Welcome to Taskmaster.
But basically what they do is it's like 6 celebrities, and they have to do a specific task, and how they decide to go about doing it is completely up to them. And so, humorous shenanigans.
You know where else has been humorous shenanigans? In the ever-increasing size of indie games at EGX.
Right. So yes, indie games at EGX. But yes, there are numerous. And then when it comes to... I feel obligated because yes, this happens at PAX, but it also happens here, and I can't wrap my brain around it.
Is it the Call of Duty round?
Yes, it is.
This is the Call of Duty round. Listeners, I've heard this round like 3 or 4 times at this point. It's amazing. Please continue.
I'm not gonna. No, you're taking the. You shut up. You started this. Wait, hold on. I was just thinking. I'm like, wait. He's heard this rant 3 maybe from his own mind.
Nottingham.
Like,
Nottingham.
No, but
it's true. Why do people queue?
Why do people queue or get in line for Call of Duty? Or, do we saw PlayerUnknown queues like going around? The game's, it's right there. It's on Steam. It's like $4.
I still think they must be doing some kind of competition or something that justifies that. Otherwise, it is ridiculous, they say. Although I remember years ago, Minecraft, just having tables of Minecraft being played here, and parents just watching, no doubt wondering why they paid for a ticket to the show,
Surprised there's not a Fortnite booth right next to the PlayerUnknown booth.
And they're just stealing signage.
Just taking signage. I cannot wait until that story.
If you very clear, we are very good friends with.
Oh no, we're agnostic. No. We are completely agnostic in this conversation.
We're agnostic in that conversation.
But it is very much going to be a narrative over the next at least week, given the way news cycles work now. But
sure.
If you don't know about this, Fortnite have put out a free patch, or just a completely free version of a battle royale game, which has been PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds Chicken Dinner for the last couple months. But yeah, surprise, there's going to be a lot of battle royale games over the next 6 months.
I've heard, I just walking around talking to people, I've heard of millions of dollars that are being invested into battle royale games right now. It's MMOs again, right? It's MMOs, it's Minecraft, it's Facebook. It's whenever something like this blows up, a bunch of people manage to convince very rich people that what the world needs is 20 more of them. Every single time, and it's always weird to watch play out.
I did like you on Twitter the other day.
I like me on Twitter.
Being all like, yeah, Thomas was alone, Battle Royale. Volume, Battle Royale.
We're doing it. We're going to
Subsurface Circular, Battle Royale.
Yeah. We're keeping Earthshape pure because, that's fine. We're not going to go there with that, but yeah.
The other thing from the show, other than cues for games that are going to be out in 2 weeks,
I got specifically. I was talking to I won't say the game, but a representative from a very big AAA franchise, and I said, "Should I go and play the demo?" And he actively said, "Don't bother. It's out in 2 weeks, you idiots." To me, that happened to me. I won't say the game, but yeah, it is ridiculous. But also, I remember as a teenager how exciting it was to be the first of my friends to play a game. That was cool.
Yeah. Now, Switch,
Yep.
a real presence at the show.
Yep, they've got their Indies section. They were in Ubisoft section with the Rabbids game, and then obviously they have their own stand as well. So yeah, they were everywhere.
Yeah, and there's a huge Rabbid Kong statue.
You were very excited about that. I can't remember what we were doing, but we were rushing somewhere, and you made me wait while you did a selfie.
Yes.
I can't remember why we were rushing, but yeah.
I did a selfie like Rabbid Peach in front of Rabbid Kong. That game is so good. Go and play it.
It's on my list when I get home. I'm going to play it. I think it's going to be my cool down game.
Yeah. No, it's So yeah, it's pretty much for the lessons from EGX are indie presence continues to get larger as AAA doesn't shrink. I would say almost it's
consolidates. I think is the word, right? Like they're making a smaller number of much bigger games.
Yeah, like they're reducing to like a jus.
A what? Sorry,
a jus.
Go on.
They're enhancing their sauce.
I see what you're saying. So spelt J-U.
Sure.
It's cool. Is that how you pronounce? Is that how you spell?
No, that's not how you spell. I know. I'm not even going to play this game with you.
Okay.
But yeah, it's essentially the AAAs are refining to the point where this isn't. They don't show up and have 8 games that they show anymore.
No.
Like they show up. I think Ubisoft is the only one who's here where there's 3 games they're showing.
Even there, it's just Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, and Rabbids, right? Like that's it. Yeah.
It's a very focused sort of thing.
Sure.
But yeah, and we have to go on stage in a few hours and do our thing. You will be talking about small games or games that are very far away. We're still not sure about that.
Were you trying to do the Father Ted bit? And you were doing an Irish accent, right?
I was not doing an Irish accent, but that was definitely the Father Ted bit. By the way, Father Ted, small.
It's pronounced Dublin, by the way, if you want to get that right when you're over there.
Small or far away. Check it out on YouTube.
1, 2, 3. I wanna thank you for reading the freedom mail again. Thank you for reading the freedom mail again.
Hi, Alexander and Mike.
No, the order's got wrong. They've done that wrong. It's Mike and Alexander in parentheticals. Carry on.
Sorry. Hi, Alexander and Mike. Has a bad game that you've played ever generated a good idea for your game, or were you only inspired by good games? And if it did, can you share some examples? Best regards, our friend Andre.
So, yeah, I mean, all games inspire in different ways. I think also you can definitely learn lessons from bad games in terms of, let's not do it like this. I'm not particularly keen on knocking other people's games.
Yeah, no.
You enjoy those, so go for it.
No, it's I don't do that either. Here's the bus. It's an interesting one because I look at a situation like Subsurface is actually a great example of this.
Of a bad game?
No.
Okay.
Of a genre that has a specific thought to it, and you've got a different idea going into it.
Sure.
And then you bring it up to me, and because I really have nothing to base it on, I kind of shrug my shoulders and go, I guess you could go try that. Because
I think the conversation with Subsurface when I first said I want to make a text adventure game was you going, okay. That was basically it, right?
Because that's the thing is, from a sort of business perspective, or just when you have case studies that you can reference in your head, it's very easy. Like let's use Battle Royale right now. It's a really solid example. If someone were to like if Mike were to turn to me right now,
I got this great idea.
this is a really good idea. I want to do a battle royale game.
Yeah.
You know, there's
Based on Battle Royale 2, though. That's the big twist.
it would be a situation where it's like, okay, you want to do a story, so you're basing it on the movie Battle Royale.
2, yes.
Okay.
Is there a Battle Royale 2? I've got no idea.
Yeah,
I'm
actually there
committed
is.
to this bit. I have nothing.
Yeah,
no idea about
there is,
Battle
and
Royale 2,
and it's actually most, or am I thinking of the Raid 2 not being as good as
The Raid 2 is great, but it's just not a sequel to the movie The Raid. It just feels wrong. It's like, have you seen The Raid 2?
No.
It's like someone made Reservoir Dogs and then they got to make a sequel and they went, cool, I'm making The Godfather. What? that's not what we liked about the first. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
But yeah, if he decided to turn around to me and say, I want to make a battle royale game, there'd be plenty of case studies of recent examples of things that you need to do, the amount of time that it would take, how much would it cost, where would the funding come from, what would be the style of it, how would you, like what, just every sort of question about it you can sort of go about. But when he turns around and says, I want to do a text adventure game, it's kind of like,
well, yeah, and I think the big one, and I'll name games as long as they're old, but I think the really interesting point here is that there's two kinds of things you can learn from bad games. The first thing is obvious, and it's, oh, let's not do it like that, right? It's, oh, this game has terrible controls, this feels awful.
Good idea, bad execution. That's usually the
or honestly just bad idea, bad execution, like a what not to do list. That's what a lot of these games are. So that's the first way, and that's good. It's good for your kind of critical faculties as a designer, is to be able to, if you play a game and you go, oh, this feels crap, that's where most people stop. But as a designer, it's your job to know why it feels crap. Like, it's like, why, or why
I do this to you all the time.
You'll turn to me and you'll be like, this game's bad, Mike, why is it bad?
Yeah.
Like,
there's that happens at least once every couple of weeks, where I will play something and then turn to Mike and express to him
it feels floaty, or the kind of the controls feel a bit treacly, like the stuff you see in bad game reviews where it's just like a very vague kind of critique.
Yeah. And then I'll turn to him and be like, can you explain to me why I feel this way?
Yeah.
And then he'll go into a 20-minute thing of like explaining why, and it's great.
It's very tedious for you, I'm sure.
No, I actually really enjoy it.
Oh, that's good. But I think that's, and I enjoy that kind of critical thinking, and it's not stuff that ever needs to be kind of said publicly, because I'm not a game critic, but it's useful to my development for me to see bad examples of stuff and go, it helps me to solidify what I think is good design. And obviously all of this is very, very subjective. The other kind of good lesson is, often you'll play a game and it'll be terrible, or just mediocre, but there'll be something in it that's incredible. And because it's a mediocre game, not enough people played it, or no one cared, or everyone was angry because of the mediocrity. And there's actually these little moments that you, as a designer, can find, and they're the germ of a really interesting idea. And maybe they're executed brilliantly as well. Maybe they are genuinely awesome. A good example of this for me was, there was a Dreamcast game. I feel okay talking negatively about Dreamcast games. I feel like there's a statute of limitations. There's one called Headhunter. Do you remember this?
Mm-mm.
No one does. So Headhunter was an action game that was effectively a Dreamcast trying to make their own Metal Gear Solid, I guess, and it was an action game with driving sections. It was very prototypical. It was kind of Driver meets Metal Gear Solid. It was a weird game, but within it, there were some absolutely brilliant moments of design and cool choices. And as a teenager playing that game, it was terrible. I was really disappointed because I'd spent money on it. But I could find these little moments, and they were special. And that's the stuff. What's interesting to me, I talk about this a lot, and I sometimes get people knocking me on Twitter for it. But like, game design there's a lot of stealing involved. There's a lot of finding good ideas and working out how to kind of make them even better. And if you're looking at a game that was a 6 out of 10 and no one bothered playing and no one goes back to it, and I can mention it in conversation. If I mention Shenmue, you remember Shenmue, right? Like, everyone's ripping off Shenmue. If I get an idea from Headhunter that's really good, it will feel more original and different to the player because no one remembers that bad game. So that's the other thing. So I think bad games can teach you how to do better by showing you bad examples of design, but they can also have great design in them that everyone else is ignoring.
I think the old Midway or Acclaim catalogs, for our younger listeners, Midway and Acclaim were publishers once upon a time, but both now extinct.
Sure.
But there was a period in the in the 90s and the early 2000s where it was good designers working on games that didn't have the budgets that were necessary to completely follow through.
But sometimes they would have been obsessively doing something.
And there's a lot of really good examples in those games of stuff that was executed incredibly well, but it was still part of what would be a 6 out of 10 game.
And this one I worked on, so I feel kind of comfortable saying I worked on the third Dead to Rights game, Dead to Rights Retribution, which was, I think if you go on the Metacritic, I think it landed about kind of 7 out of 10 kind of Metacritic. And I still think it has the best melee/weapons-based combat I've ever seen in a game. In terms of combining a beat-em-up and a shooter, it's awesome. But no one remembers it. And it's one of those things where at some point someone's going to rip off that game, for example, and do something really cool and get lots of praise for it. But a lot of people, a lot of designers, and if you're a player who only wants to play great games, you're going to have missed out on the lessons in those games. So I try and play around with stuff. Obviously, the great thing about bad or mediocre games is you can often find them very, very cheap after the fact. So don't buy them at launch, but try and pad out your experience with those and just kind of try and learn from their hidden gems and also their massive mistakes.
Dear Bithell Games, or to whom it may concern.
Oh, so we can actually get someone else to answer this question.
Right. Context. My name is Josh, and I'm an Australian undergraduate looking to get into the game development business. From the research I've done, it seems that the Australian game development scene is, if not dead, dying. Looking at my peers who are either graduating or entering their preferred profession, they've gotten into their industry through already successful companies. Question. So my question.
Captain, my captain. Yeah.
How would you suggest I, or anyone in Australia or a country of a similar situation, attempt to enter the game development as a career? Thanks for your time. Yours sincerely, Joshua L. So it's interesting here with Joshua because he is an undergraduate, so he may not have the context of the what happened before. Mm-hmm. So specifically with Australia, once upon a time, a little over 10 years ago, there was
in the ancient past. In the 10 years ago.
In the ancient times.
What?
The retro title, Thomas Was Alone. We need to tangent on that right now for a second.
Oh, yeah.
What there's a booth here at EGX that says
that's retro games.
That's the retro indie games booth, and Thomas Was Alone, which is 5 years old, is part of that retro
which we never got an email about, as to my knowledge. They just kind of set that up. It's very flattering, but also, yeah, I'm a retro game developer. I'm in the pantheon of aged game developers.
But yeah, so don't mock me for bringing up 10 years ago and then
back in 10 years ago, oldest Australia,
when retro is apparently 5 years ago now. Anyway, so over 10 years ago, yes, there were AAA studios or AA plus studios in Australia.
Sure.
That was due to
similar to the UK.
Yep, similar to the UK. So prior to Australia, it was the UK, and both of these had to do with the exchange rate.
We were cheap Americans,
correct?
Effectively,
and so due to the exchange rate, these studios were set up, and then once the exchange rate stopped being in the favor of massive global conglomerates, they moved along.
And the elephant in the room, or the maple leaf in the room.
Well, yes. Specifically in the case of the UK, it was the Canadian tax breaks that drove everything.
Canadians became the very, very cheap Americans.
Yeah.
And
well, no, that's the funny thing. Out. They're not cheap Americans. It's that there are there are tax incentives,
which makes them cheap. So they're cheap Americans.
Yeah, it's a different.
There's nuance there.
There's a nuance there. There's definitely a conversation to have in there. But yes, Canada, for the foreseeable future, will continue to be this massive juggernaut.
Which is why you've started seeing Montreal in the credits for AAA games that you love as a player. Like, I'm sure people are seeing lots and lots of Canadian studios in credits. That's why.
Yeah. So after those studios all shut down, Australia, the sort of game community there pivoted to mobile titles.
Yep.
You actually saw a huge amount of mobile titles, and then several of those mobile titles became massive. The most obvious one is Fruit Ninja, and I am completely blanking now on the other two that were also incredibly massive, and those did very well. So that was the mobile development scene. And then I would say, over the last few years, it's kind of settled down again and sort of been normalized. And
there are some cool indie studios coming up.
And so we've got League of Geeks, which is the Armello crew, and we love those folks. But yeah, it's
the card game one that did well. I forget the name. You're like sat at a table opposite someone who's playing cards. People are yelling at their podcast right now.
I want to say something Fate.
Yes, something of fates. Yeah. Fates of the enders of space and time.
Oh, no.
I'm sure it's in the YouTube comments below this.
Yeah. And so yeah, there is an Australian community. And in that way, I would say, Joshua, reach out to those folks. Find out. There is certainly an Australian community that is worth reaching out to. Now, the issue that you bring up of being able to join an already successful company and learn your craft and then transition into something else is not an Australian theme at this point. It's a global theme. Hilariously enough, Mike and I were, just talking about it here at EGX over the past week, that the studios that once upon a time existed, where when you were a young graduate getting out of school, joining a studio, being a cog inside of the machine, but learning how the machine kind of works, and then whether deciding to stay a part of that or venture out on your own, that kind of is a much more difficult thing to find now.
Yeah.
Which is why here again at EGX, no joke, like a lot of these teams are like they're 24-year-olds, 25-year-olds who are on their second game but never joined a major studio. Like they are cobbling these things together from what they learned in school, YouTube videos, any type of information that they can find.
But they lack the practical experience of being on the team,
But they definitely never joined a studio and learned that side of things. So that's even though it might feel like you're kind of alone in this in this Australia situation, this is a global theme that you're talking about.
It's also a theme that goes beyond games. Like, we are this whole gig economy stuff. Like, we are not, people don't have careers in the same way as they used to, and it's a really that's troubles me. As some, I mean, maybe I'm just old, maybe it seems troubling to me, but actually kids today don't worry about it so much. But yeah, I think the big thing here is your job is to get really good at what you do, and finding a path to getting good will work. Making your own games is one way of getting good. I would always kind of say try and find somewhere to work, because that will accelerate your learning. And at a certain point, you'll start getting frustrated and you'll be like, no, I'm going to do my own thing, but you'll have a bunch of awareness to help you with that. So I would seek out that stuff. I would also be try and be specific in your skill set. Like, get really good at a specific small job that you can go and do for a bigger studio. A company like League of Geeks, they're not going to hire you as an all-rounder, awesome, interesting indie that's just coming up, but they might really need someone to make rock textures. So if you can make good rock textures for them, you're fine.
But he has all these ideas. He wants to sell these ideas. Who's going to pay him for his ideas?
No one's going to pay for any ideas.
No one's going to pay you for your ideas.
Well, he didn't say that. Don't put words in Josh's mouth.
No. I'm not saying Josh was like, but
Josh sounds like a very switched on guy to me. I think he's better. He knows better than to think that ideas people are useful. But yeah, that is always a funny one when you have the person who's like, I'd like to sell you an idea. I've got 50 in my head and I haven't got enough time or money to make any of them, so why would I want to buy the 50 first? Yeah, it's a tough one. But yeah, community. I think that's the key point from what Alexander said, is find that community, because it exists. There will be meetups, there will be community stuff happening. If you're in Australia and you're at university, then chances are you're in one of those major cities, one of those major hubs, and there will be a local gaming community. Find out what's going on, find out the lay of the land. Don't assume that it's dying or dead, because I think actually there's a resurgence happening. I think there is a transfusion, spelled with a Z, of new and exciting talent and companies happening, and I think you could be a part of that upswing. You know, the great thing about a dip is that on the way back up, there's lots of opportunity for people who are there. So yeah, find community, find the local game devs, and get a lay of the land, and start working out how you can be useful to other people and how your game can get made.
Yeah, and find the spaces in between. And if you know, Mike bringing up the gig economy doesn't mean anything to you, or you know, I would actually recommend reading up on sort of what the gig economy is, because it's a macroeconomics concept that is
a horrible thing, is what it is.
It is going to become. It was already a reality. I mean, I just look at my career, right, where I left university. I had to get, I worked in a hospital for a while because I had to get a job, and then, transitioned to a newspaper. Remember those?
That was like a blog you could carry without battery, right?
Yeah. But then, I worked at a newspaper for a little while, but then the rest of, for the next 10 years, it was freelance. It was what this economy is turning into.
Yeah, because tech industry tends to lead where everyone else follows, and I think, and it is troubling, and it worries me that there is a generation of younger devs who don't have a career to step into in the same way as I did 10 years ago. So that worries me, but that's probably a podcast in and of itself.
Yeah.
From Josh's perspective, find those opportunities, find the people around you, and get to work.
If you have a burning question about games, game development, or just about the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@bithelgames.com. That's contact@bithelgames.com, through the YouTube comments of this show, or on Twitter by pinging @MikeBithell or @Slewinski. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. We can always use your support. Please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and positive reinforcement on whatever other platforms you're hearing this show on whenever possible. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Dowden. We'll be back next week. I'm Alexander Slewinski. Thanks again, and get in the last word, Mike.
Nottingham.